XL Pledge of Resistance, a winning movement, which is part of a nationwide effort to stop the Keystone XL pipeline. And did I mention that we are winning? She is also an active member of Fossil Free UW, a student group pushing for fossil fuel divestment at UW-Madison. Let's give it up for Kaja.
All right, testing 1, 2, 3, right volume. Am I yelling at you guys too much? Good. A little closer. Okay, there we go. Good. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about things from the angle of the climate change movement. And all of our fights here are related, and I'll get to that. But first off, we're in a very tricky place in human history. I think we all here know that. That we are at a juncture where we need to decide the way forward. Our scientists are telling us that if we don't take action soon, some very bad things are going to happen. We're already seeing the effects of a warming planet around us, and our scientists are telling us that there are tipping points in the climate system. That even though things are changing now, they may change very, very suddenly at certain points in the future. We don't know where those points are exactly. So we're basically all walking towards this cliff in the dark. We don't know where the cliff is, but we're just continuing to walk, which is frankly insane. You know, it's time to do something different, to change our direction, to stop, and to save ourselves, basically. Now, I just want to say that climate change is almost like a meta issue that really impacts everything else that we care about. As many of you, I'm also a labor activist. I'm an activist. I fight in other causes too that I care about very deeply. But climate change is a huge threat. If we don't have a livable climate in the future, we basically aren't going to be able to have workers' rights. Public education doesn't really matter anymore, and having a society where everybody is respected doesn't really mean anything, because we need a society to have all those things. We need people still around, and at this point, we're really, Leslie's giving me saying up. At this point, we really are threatening our future in a very fundamental way, and I think that's important to understand. Now, and what's also important, though, is to not just get depressed and say we can't do anything about this, because frankly the solutions are right within our grasp. We have the technology now to move off of fossil fuels and to stabilize our climate. And there was recently a major report that came out by top scientists in the world, in the IPCC, that said that it would be pretty cheap to do it too if we act now. So we can make a difference. We can stop walking off the cliff. But what we do have a problem with right now is in the social realm. It's not a technological problem, it's a social problem. And what that means is that we have some people, not that I'm going to name any names, but some people who profit off of fossil fuel extraction and sales. And they have a lot of power, they have a lot of money, they don't want the system to change, they're comfortable, and they think if they throw enough money at our politicians and buy those politicians, they're going to be able to block change indefinitely. But frankly, there's something I think they haven't taken into account, which is that the status quo, even though it seems like it's going to be around forever, isn't necessarily around forever. You know, things actually do change. Climate system, unfortunately, has tipping points, but fortunately, our social and political systems also have tipping points. And there's lots of examples of this in our history. You know, there was a time, it wasn't actually all that long ago, when the idea that only men should have the right to vote was common sense. And that changed, right? And there was a time even less, more in our recent history, when separate but equal was just seen as a system that was going to be around forever, right? At least in parts of the country. But that changed too. Yeah. And just a few short years ago, I think that the idea that same-sex marriage might actually be legalized someday was, frankly, kind of unthinkable. But we're watching that change before our very eyes. My point is that things can change when people decide to join together and use their power to make things change. If change is possible, it can happen quite rapidly when we work together to make it happen. Woo! And right now, there are signs that change is happening in the climate movement. That kind of change. People are coming together, and I'm just going to talk really briefly, I really will try to be brief, about one part of the climate movement I'm involved in, which is the fight against the Keystone XL pipeline. For those of you who don't know, this is a proposed pipeline that would go from Alberta, Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, or at least provide that link, and allow much greater extraction and sale of the tar sands of Alberta, which are some of the dirtiest, most carbon-intensive fossil fuels on the planet. These are the tar sands that, if burned, according to top climatologist James Hansen, would mean game over for the climate. This is a big deal. And because this pipeline crosses an international border, it's basically up to Obama, up to the president to get his approval before it can go forward. And that gives us a way that we can influence the process. So a few years ago, in 2008, this pipeline was proposed, and the common wisdom was that this was just going to get a green light. This was business as usual. This is what we do. We build pipelines. We dig stuff out of the ground and we burn it and throw the carbon in the atmosphere, and this is what we've always done. This is what we're going to keep doing. And, the heck if anybody thought otherwise. Well, something funny actually ended up happening. In 2011, over 1,000 people got arrested at the White House in D.C. Protesting the pipeline. And at that point, the pipeline went from being an easy yes, that was just going to be green lighted, to maybe we need to think about this a little bit longer. And then shortly after that, the No Keystone XL Pledge of Resistance got going across the country. And that was an effort to train activists across the country to resist in their local areas using acts of peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience to resist the pipeline if necessary. Right now we have over 100 different actions ready to deploy across the country if needed to stop the pipeline. And then just last month, 400 students roughly were arrested in DC as well, protesting the pipeline. And I'm proud to say that I had the privilege of being among them. And anyway, it goes on. There have been resistance coming from many different corners. Our Native American brothers and sisters have resisted the pipeline valiantly in different places and other pipelines as well. They've got some of the longest history of resisting these projects. There have been other civil disobedience actions. There are Nebraskan landowners that are challenging the pipeline's route through Nebraska in court. I could go on. There have been Nobel laureates who've come out against it. The pressure basically is building. And right now, just today in Washington, D.C., there's a group called the Cowboy Indian Alliance that has a big protest there, which we're actually here in solidarity with, right? And if you can think of, some more kind of, I don't want to say unlikely, but at least surprising allies to come together to fight against this, I challenge you to do so, because I think what's really striking about this movement is it is involving a lot of different people coming together and fighting side by side, and I think that's why we're starting to win. And I think we are starting to win on this particular fight. Just recently, Obama decided to push off the decision till after the midterms, which means that he's feeling some pressure not to make a decision before the election. So I count that as evidence that we are winning on this. And there has been actually some reports in the press that he's decided not to approve the pipeline, although that hasn't been confirmed yet. But I think that what is obvious is that going from the point of where this thing was just going to be green lighted to where we are now is because of all of our resistance. And I think that Bill McKibben put it really well recently, and I'm going to have to read this quote because I don't remember it off the top of my head. But he recently said, 3 years ago this pipeline was a done deal, and thanks to you it's come steadily undone. So, thank you to everybody who's been in this fight. But not only, is this particular fight important for its own sake, but I think it's important the lessons that it can teach us. And I think those are three different things. One is that we the people actually do have power if we choose to exercise it. So that's number one. Number two is that we're stronger together. We should be fighting our fights together and joining forces as opposed to kind of each taking our own little thing and fighting on that. And number three is that even if things seem impossible and somebody in power tells you it's impossible, don't assume it's impossible. Lots of impossible things become possible once you start actually pushing on them. So I'd invite everybody, I just want to say really quickly that I'd invite everybody here to join the Keystone XL Resistance Movement. If you have any interest, we are doing another training on May 3rd. I think somebody has flyers around, although I'm not sure where. You can talk to me afterwards if you're interested. And just really quickly, wanted to say that these lessons that at least I'm getting out of the Keystone XL movement, I think are important for the broader fight. And by broader fight, I mean that this is just one small battle in a much broader, struggle. And that struggle is stopping climate change, but it's also making the kind of world we actually want to live in. And that means a world not only where we're not taking away more than we're putting back, into the earth, so that we are actually preserving it for future generations, but also a world in which everybody has the ability to meet their basic needs, a world where we are all respected and valued, a world where we can all fulfill our true potential. So I think that as we all struggle towards that world, I think if we remember that we have power, we're stronger together, and another world is possible, that we will be able to get there.